Do you want to get your kicks on Route 66? Well, then we'll find out if this Nissan is the car for you. That's right beside me today, I got a 2020 Nissan Kicks. Now, I will admit that Nissan has not always fared super well in these buyer bust reviews. They've had a few busts along the way, but I have some hope today for the Nissan Kicks. It's one of the newest Nissans that we've had the chance to review. And I'm hoping that Nissan has improved their reliability a little bit to where I can recommend them. Now, sometimes Nissan is forgotten between the Hondas and the Toyotas of the world, but a lot of times they can offer a good amount of value. But we are going to explore if these cars would last to 250 or 300,000 miles. We'll take a walk around the outside, talk about the common problems, and then we will decide if the Nissan Kicks is a buy or a bust. Starting up front here on our Kicks. And I gotta tell you, I actually think for what this car is, I don't think any of the cars in this class are great looking vehicles, but I think Nissan did okay, especially based on some of their other designs that I wasn't necessarily a fan of. I actually don't have a whole lot of cosmetic issues on the outside of this. The only thing, and maybe some of the viewers who are watching this can give me an answer, but I could not find one for sure, was the A-pillars are wrapped in a sort of flat vinyl wrap on this car, and those are faded a little bit. I do not know whether that was a factory option from Nissan or if someone got that done somewhere over the past few years here, but I do notice that those are faded. Otherwise, the headlights are not oxidized yet, but Nissan has had an issue with that, so I expect that to probably be an issue as these age. But overall, not a lot to mention on this car as far as cosmetic issues. Under the hood of our Kicks, we got the 1.6 liter four-cylinder that makes 122 horsepower and 114 pound-feet of torque. Not crazy numbers by any stretch. Probably a little bit low for this size of a car, to be 100% honest. I don't expect that we are going to be winning any drag races here. Now, if you can ignore the bees that are flying in front of the camera lens for a few seconds, we will talk about this engine because today, for the Kicks, we're kicking it old school engine-wise here. This is a naturally aspirated, non-direct injection engine, which in 2020 had almost pretty much gone by the wayside by most manufacturers in small cars. They've all gone to direct injection and turbo engines. So this is actually, I think, a good thing. These are a simpler engine, which generally would lead us to having fewer problems. Now let's talk about the few common problems that this engine does have. One of the big ones is it still uses thin oil, and around 150,000 miles, you will start having some oil consumption issues where it starts burning a little bit of oil. It could even start before that, but that would actually probably be my number one issue on these engines. I would keep up with oil changes very regularly. This is a timing chain engine, so it would be a little bit more sensitive to regular oil changes, but I haven't seen a lot of timing issues with this engine, thankfully. So just make sure that it's not smoking or burning a ton of oil if you're looking at a used one. The next most common problem on these is actually the fuel pump, which isn't the engine at all, but you might come out and your car won't start, or it'll start for a second and then shut off. The fuel pump impeller, which doesn't really matter, but you have to replace the fuel pump sometimes, a very common problem on these engines. The one thing I should mention on that fuel pump issue though, is that there is some recalls for it. So you have to run the VIN. It's not on every single one that really has the issue, but there is a recall out there. So run the VIN and check if yours is one of those cars. Now, other issues that you could have but aren't overly common, if you have a little misfire, coil pack spark plugs could go bad as you get up to 150,000, something like that. If you have a check engine light, your most common cause for that is going to be evap codes. Emission systems issues, could be purge valve. Usually something that will not actually cause the engine to run any different, but will give you that beautiful little light on your dash. Now there's two other things, kind of like the fuel pump, that are not really engine issues so much, but they are something that can affect your enjoyment of this car, and that would be motor mounts. Motor mounts are known to go bad around 100,000 miles on these. Not an expensive fix, but it will cause some clunking in the drive line here. The other one is your interior comfort, and that's air conditioning. The AC compressors on these are known to fail, and that can be a pretty expensive fix if you take it to a dealer or a higher end mechanic. Sometimes it can be done for a few $100s, sometimes it's $1,000. But just check and make sure that the AC is working properly if you're looking at a used one. Now, this engine is mated to a CVT transmission, and if you know anything about my videos or CVTs in general, you'll know that they are not highly regarded out there on the market at times, especially Nissan, because they had a ton of problems. They were one of the early adopters to the CVT transmission, and they just did not have very good success for a many years there. However, in 2019, they did do a bunch of updates, and they actually are somewhat decently reliable now. They did a bunch of cooling upgrades and things that have made them a whole lot better. The maintenance is still the key. I would still change the fluid with the fluid that Nissan recommends, their brand, pretty regularly, maybe every 30 or 40,000 miles, to make sure that the CVT does last as long as it possibly can. But I've seen these now go between 200,000 and 300,000 miles really without an issue, other than just driving a CVT sometimes isn't the most enjoyable driving experience. But reliability-wise, they have done way better. Moving on to the interior here of our Nissan Kicks. Remember, this is a small kind of starter entry-level car, and I think in a lot of ways the interior feels like that, but it still feels fairly modern. Lots of hard plastic inside here. Your door panels, your dash, everything like that. There's a little bit of stitched vinyl in the center console where your leg would rest. Otherwise, there's really not a soft piece of material other than the seats inside here. I don't actually hate that for this level of car. I think that's kind of any auto manufacturer out there. As far as wear and tear, I did notice things like the silver on the door panels gets scratched up pretty easily. Kind of insignificant stuff. The seats wear pretty well. The foam is a little softer, and that might wear a little bit more over time. You might find the seat to be worn out. But really, I'm impressed. The steering wheel, all of those things have held up really nicely. As far as electronics now, these are actually decently reliable as well. They did have some issues with like your accident avoidance and things like that, where the car would brake suddenly. There's been some service bulletins out there on that. So if you're looking at a used one, make sure you don't have any warning lights for crash detection and things like that, or auto braking, some of the driver assistance things, because they can be a little bit fluky on these cars. But again, that's very common amongst just pretty much any car out there. Infotainment is decently reliable, but they have had some issues with like cameras freezing, things like that. Just some tech issues here and there. AC, again, always make sure that that is working properly and put your windows up and down. If all those things are working, you probably are good to go for a long while. Moving on to the rear seat here of the Kicks. And while not super spacious, it actually sits an adult decently comfortably. I got probably 2 or 3 inches of headroom, and I'm 5'9". I got 2 or 3 inches of leg room. This seat is where I would sit up front. So I really have no complaints. As far as wear and tear, again, it's very basic, very simple. There's not that much to go wrong back here. So not really any concerns. As far as features, you got cup holders in the door, and you got your power window switches. That is the end of the features in the rear seat here. Moving on to the trunk of the Kicks, and honestly, I was kind of impressed with the amount of space back here. Not any crazy features or anything like that. The seats do fold down, and you could easily put probably 3 full-size suitcases back here without a big issue. So you could pretty much, for the amount of people you're gonna have inside this car, take anything along that you need. Pulling out onto the road now in our Nissan Kicks. And we're not driving this just for kicks. We're doing it for a review. So, real big purpose here. We are headed into a town here, which actually, while we can't do our acceleration run quite yet, gives us a good chance to feel the transmission, how it does just on a normal, everyday stop and go type of situation. Because sometimes that's where a CVT will really show some quirks. Really, a CVT will show quirks just about anywhere. So far, I haven't felt anything super odd with this one. Just doing slight in-traffic acceleration here. I can feel that it's a CVT, but I think they have improved a lot as far as the actual driving feel over what they were maybe 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. All right, we are out of town now, and we got the chance to get on it and feel all those horsepower. Let's go. Well, that feels about right for what it is. Slow. Let me try from. I'm actually going to slow down a little bit here and go from like 40, maybe like you're on an on-ramp or something like that, where you should be, having to accelerate quickly into traffic. Here we go. They do have some simulated shift in there or something. As you're revving up, it's just not a lot of power. Definitely slow. But with slow, I guess we should talk about the fuel economy. The fuel economy is pretty decent, but not incredible. 31.36 for this, being a hatchback or small SUV, whatever category you want to put it in, is decent. So not too bad in that regard. And honestly, just as I'm driving up a hill here and some things like that, the actual driving experience feels decent. There's definitely points where the engine feels like it's working a little harder than you would want it to, but that's typical CVT stuff. Now, I have been over some bumps here on this test drive. I have not noticed any clunks, loose steering, anything like that. Some of the things you want to look out for, there's a few things under the suspension here that you do need to look at. Number one would be struts, and the control arm bushings are known to fail fairly early on these. The next thing I would check on your test drive is just listen. And listen to hear if you have any wheel bearing noise, any humming kind of going on, or an ABS or traction control light on, because Nissan is pretty famous for around 75,000 miles having wheel bearings go bad. Not the most expensive fix, not something I'm terribly concerned about, but it is something to look out for. And if you're ever trying to diagnose the wheel bearing or know if that's what the humming sound is, you can just carefully rock the car back and forth like this out on the road. And if the noise changes, you'll be able to pinpoint where that, or which wheel that noise is coming from and which wheel bearing has gone bad. Last thing I would check for, and you can do this under acceleration, we already talked about it a little bit under the hood, but just make sure you don't have a clunking coming from under the hood that is bad motor mounts, because that's a typical problem, is like we said, not that expensive to fix. Overall, the actual driving experience, I think Nissan has improved over what they were putting out 10 years ago. Still not the most refined feeling engines or transmissions for sure. There's better CVTs out there, but I think they have made some progress anyways. And actually driving around in it, other than just being a little low on power, which in most situations isn't even going to really bug me, they drive pretty nice. I really, actually, there's some things that I kind of like about these. Back from the test drive, and now it's time to decide if the Nissan Kicks is a buy or a bust, and if I think it'll last to 250 or 300,000 miles without major issues. Test drive went pretty well, and in a lot of ways I'm impressed with the improvements that Nissan has made. I don't think that they really are a super refined vehicle. I think there's probably better options out there for that, but let's talk about value. And these cars run with 150,000 miles, which is what we always base these videos on, right around $7,000–8,000. This car has less than that. It's actually under 100,000 miles, and it's for sale for $11,000. I think these cars, while they're not for everybody because they are a little bit small, they're not fancy, anything like that, but for just a little daily driver that gets decent fuel economy, I think they would actually fit into a lot of people's life. And Nissan has come so far with their CVTs. They did a lot of upgrades in 2019 over prior CVT transmissions that they had, that I actually really don't have a lot of concerns about it other than maintenance. I think you should still change the fluid as regularly as possible. And if you're buying a used one, try to get some of those maintenance records or talk to them about it so that you know if the transmission was taken care of. I think this engine is pretty solid as well. And those two things are a surprising piece of information for me today from our past Nissan reviews. And I am going to make the Nissan Kicks a buy. It actually was an easier decision than I thought before researching this car, but people have had a pretty good experience with them. They're not perfect. And yeah, you might have a CVT issue here or there with them, but keep up with the maintenance. It goes a long way, and I think you can reach pretty high mileage out of one of these. If you're in the market for one of these, check the link in the description down below, because this one is for sale right now at one of the awesome dealers we work with. If you have one of these cars, you've had a great experience, I want to hear about it, or if you've had a terrible experience, I want to hear about that too. Put all your thoughts in the comments down below. I'll read them. I appreciate you guys following along. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.